Hello world, I am Timber, and this is Minecraft. Something that has always captivated me about Minecraft is not only can you play Minecraft the game, but you can also play a variety of mini-games within Minecraft. Whether you're in survival, creative, a public server, or a private server, you can always find things to do such as Spleef, Bed Wars, and even Manhunt. I've only seen a couple of YouTubers play this game, and it was by far popularized and invented by the YouTuber Dream. Although I've found many hint and tip videos about what to do when you're the hunted, I never see a tip or hint about what to do when you're the hunter. So I figured that would be a perfect place for me to start. This video will be some of my thoughts and headcanon as to how to produce beneficial results when you're playing as the hunter in a Minecraft manhunt. With that, let's go. If you've ever watched anyone play a game of Minecraft Manhunt, you might be led to believe that the Slayer, the individual who is attempting to slay the dragon, has the supreme disadvantage, when actually I suspect it is the hunter who has the disadvantage, which would be why more and more hunters are needed to be added in order to increase difficulty. Simply put, it's a matter of objective. While the hunter's objective is to kill the Slayer has no reason to stay behind and allow himself to be killed by the hunter. The Slayer's objective is to slay the dragon. The hunter is not where the dragon is, so there is no reason for them to clash. The Slayer has every incentive to simply run away and seek better and better equipment and resources, not to take on the hunter, but to kill the dragon. This means the hunter is at a supreme disadvantage, as the Slayer will only turn around to fight him when the opportune moment arises. He'll almost never turn around and fight when things are not going his way. To put this into the simplest terms possible, everyone who is a hunter is playing soldier, but the Slayer is playing scout. And if you've ever played Team Fortress 2 or any shooter game, you know that high mobility plus an objective that has nothing to do with your opponent means that your opponent cannot kill you easily. I've developed a meta here, a meta that I believe will tip the balance of power into the hunter's favor once and for all. If followed, it should allow you to beat the Slayer with minimal difficulty and maximum efficiency. Granted, keep in mind that you'll be facing a real living person who is capable of making his own decisions, and victory is not guaranteed. As the hunter meta gets refined and researched, so does the Slayer meta, and things could rapidly change as a living person accounts for what he thinks you're going to do. That being said, let's start with the first part and organize everyone into what I'm calling classes or roles. So, let's go. The Chaser is a bare-bones player, often with no inventory or weapons to speak of, but could have one or two items, and they will be solely focused on kamikazing themselves into the Slayer to produce as much damage as possible, supporting their team by constantly keeping the Slayer on their toes and preventing them from being able to gather beneficial resources and preventing proper food saturation. This is every conceivable weapon and tool that the Chaser could potentially use. We'll start with wood. Wood, and its like variant for armor, leather, are perfectly acceptable for the Chaser to carry, because although when dying the Slayer might obtain these items are common enough to where it's expected for the Slayer to have them. The same goes for stone and its natural likeness and armor variant, chainmail. Although you wouldn't want your enemy to have them, there's no harm to them having them, because they're not that good, and it's likely that they'll obtain these items anyway. You'll notice that iron is completely redded out. That is because the Chaser should not be carrying an iron weapon, should not be carrying iron tools, and should not have on iron armor. These are worth keeping by. Iron weapons are strong enough to be viable in combat. Iron tools allow access to better materials such as diamonds, and iron armor is good enough to be enchanted. Gold weapons are in yellow. This is because although gold weapons are cheap and relatively not worthy of combat, they can be upgraded via enchantments. And if your enemy has access to any enchantments, or if you decide to enchant them when taking them into combat, they could be viable enough in a single burst to cause trouble. It'll be up to you and your team whether or not your Chasers are allowed to have gold weapons. Gold tools are in the clear, for although they can be very quick and they can be useful for the Chaser, they're ultimately not that useful for the Slayer, he'll likely leave these on the ground and won't bother keeping them or even destroying them. The same goes for gold armor. It's likely the only time you all will need gold armor is when you're in the nether anyway, and it's expected that you should have it on. Diamond and netherite tools, weapons, and armor are completely unacceptable for the Chaser to hold. Because the Chaser's strategy is to not care about his own life and to kamikaze into the enemy, there is no reason for him to have these on his person. Support items such as blaze rods, telescopes, eyes of ender, enchanted gold apples, totems of undying, shields, specialized range weapons, specialized crafting blocks, potions, and raw resources should not be held by the Chaser. The Chaser does not value his own life, and these items could easily be used by the Slayer to benefit him in his pursuits. Some of the specialty techniques of the Chaser is to drag aggro over to the Slayer in the hopes of killing him. If he chooses to do so, he can attack a zombie piglin and drag the entire horde over to the Slayer in the hopes that the Slayer will accidentally aggro on the horde. Taming and breeding dogs is also an effective method at dealing damage to the Slayer. By having a large army of dogs, you can guarantee that the Slayer will be outnumbered and outdamaged by your assault. However, you should keep these dogs away from your other rolled players, as they could easily turn on your own allies. You can also aggro Endermen by looking at them. However, their large amount of damage, teleportation, and general unpredictability means that they're by far the worst of these three options. However, it's ultimately up to the Chaser's discretion whether or not he wants to use them. There are a couple of basic items that the Chaser will be using in small number. A single piece of food is for gathering saturation before he begins chasing the Slayer. An ender pearl is to make up distance towards the Slayer, but should only be carried in quantities of 1, with it being used up initially, and then none can drop after he dies to the Slayer. A splash potion can be used at any close range as long as it's a negative effect potion. Whether or not he takes damage from his own splash potion is irrelevant. All that matters is killing the Slayer. This is what the Chaser will typically look like. No armor, just himself, running with everything he has towards his opponent, usually with just a weapon, an ender pearl, and a splash potion. There are a couple of specialty items that might be worthy of consideration. A TNT minecart can be detonated by dropping or detonated by damage, a piece of TNT, an end crystal, which could be used for healing the ender dragon or for damage, a bed, which could only be used to damage in the nether or end, named item junk materials such as dirt, rotten flesh, or other things that aren't really that useful that might otherwise be left behind. Giving them an individual name and placing them in the Chaser's inventory will allow him to clatter up the Slayer's inventory with useless junk. The Slayer will then not be able to pick up items, or will be forced to look inside his inventory to purge these items out. This will give you plenty of opportune moments to deal damage. A flint and steel is for lighting TNT, but could also be used to deal damage or even burn entire forests to the ground if need be. And finally, if you need to hand the components for building a wither to your Chaser, to summon a wither and deal ultimate damage to the Slayer, do so. Lastly, on the Chaser, I'd like to make a point about potential enchantments. Enchantments should only be placed on gold items which are going to be broken quickly. These items are going to lose so much durability in a fight, it won't matter that the Chaser has dropped them. The Slayer will not get full use of them. No enchantments should be put on a diamond or iron weapon and then given to the Chaser. As the Chaser is a kamikaze role, these weapons would be given to the Slayer, and the Slayer would ultimately benefit from having fought the Chaser. When starting a manhunt, all hunters start out as Chaser hunters. Although you can convert into other roles, it is likely on death that you can convert back into a Chaser at a moment's notice to deal whatever desperate damage you can to the Slayer in the hopes of stopping him and winning the game. Now then, let's move on. The next role is small, but still important, the Grinder Hunter. The reason I named this role the Grinder is because although everyone is gathering, not everyone will be able to grind for materials. The Grinder's job is to go to farms, mines, and anything else in which useful materials can be repeatedly ground. Whether that's killing iron golems or killing particular mobs of a certain type, the Grinder's job is to do that. The reason I did not give the Grinder a large list of various weapons and materials that he could and could not use is because none of them should be in the Grinder's hand. The Grinder should avoid combat at all cost. He should carry large amounts of raw materials, but make sure that these raw materials are not dropped or given to the enemy. He should also focus on inventory management, whether that's chest boats, llamas, or anything. He should try to increase his ability to carry materials. The one item he should carry on him at all times is a lava bucket. It is better to burn all of your items than it is to give them to the Slayer. Although not the most exciting or fun role, the grinder can be an effective means of gaining large materials and is worthy of your consideration for play. The next role we have to play is the Brute. Named after the Piglin Brute, I think you'll recognize his strategy of play. Most weapons, tools, and armor are perfectly acceptable for the Brute to use, as his goal is to out-damage and out-defend everything the Slayer could possibly have. However, you'll notice that diamond tools and netherite tools are redded out. That is because these tools are simply way too useful for the Slayer to potentially gain, as well as they offer no benefit to the Brute to carry them. Having a diamond tool does not necessarily gain you any other item other than just blocks faster, and there's no reason for the Brute to acquire that many blocks that fast. Should a Slayer actually manage to kill the Brute, there's no reason he should be getting better tools as a result of doing so. Support item restrictions are complicated. Blaze rods are a no-go. There's no reason the Brute should be carrying them, as they provide no extra benefit to combat. Telescopes are expected to be carried so the Brute can increase his range of sight and see more clearly what the Slayer is up to. Eyes of Ender are unacceptable to carry, as there's no reason to give these to the Slayer. Life-saving healing items such as golden apples or totems of undying are perfectly acceptable to carry. It's better for the Brute to live another day than it is to die and give his materials to the enemy. Shields for blocking damage, specialized range weapons such as tridents, crossbows, and bows and arrows are all perfectly acceptable to hold. Specialty crafting items are useless to the Brute and shouldn't be carried around by the Brute in case the Slayer should happen upon them or have access to them. Potions may be carried to the Brute's benefit. Raw materials for crafting do not serve the Brute any benefit and should not be carried by the Brute as to lower the priority of his targeting by the Slayer. As a role-based specialty technique, the Brute can carry around a bed, not to respawn on himself, but to allow a chaser to respawn. By effectively supporting the chaser's distance of travel through respawn point, he can use the chaser to his benefit and allow an opportune moment to deal massive damage to the Slayer. Some specialty items the Brute might consider carrying are movement-based items such as cobwebs. These can slow the Slayer's approach or retreat. However, he does not want to leave these items behind or allow the Slayer to collect these items, as they could easily be turned back on the group of hunters. Beds, of course, can be used in combination with chasers or as a source of damage. However, the Brute should not put himself in harm's way when using these beds. Rather, he should give them to a chaser which is not concerned with his own existence. The same goes for TNT and End crystals. However, these can also be used to heal the Ender Dragon. The Brute can use ranged weapons and should carry around a stock of ammunition. The Brute should carry food for himself, but also food for a nearby chaser. These can be dispensed one at a time simply to keep up food saturation and keep the chaser running. Lastly, the Brute should carry around lava, not only as a source of damage, but as a final option should he feel he is about to die, rather than allow his items to go to the Slayer. This is what the Brute should endeavor to look like, completely armored and ready to take on the world. With a chaser out front taking the full blow from any potential traps, the Brute will follow up slowly and methodically behind, taking full advantage of any opportunity that comes his way. Now we have our final role, the Keeper. I named it the Keeper because the Quartermaster did not fit on the sign, but the Keeper is also a good name. The Keeper is expected to carry the full range of tools, armors, and weapons. However, this is purely to a self-preservation status, not to deal damage to the Slayer. The same goes for supporting items. He is expected to carry all these as part of his role and provide support to the other members of the team. The Keeper will deploy beds, both as a method of self-resurrection as well as a method of resurrection for others. The only individual not expected to use these beds is the Chaser, who will likely have a more mobile bed via a Brute. Horses will provide supreme mobility, allowing the Keeper to stay away from combat, but also close enough to it that he can provide effective support. Llamas and donkeys will provide an extension to his inventory while still staying mobile. Combat should be avoided at all cost. The risk of a keeper dying and allowing large numbers of valuable items to be given to the Slayer is simply too great for him to take on even the most opportune moments. It's better he risk the Slayer getting away on half a heart than it is he risk dying and throwing the entire game by handing the enemy exactly what he needs to win. This would be a typical keeper setup: an ender chest and barrels for inventory extension, large numbers of furnaces for milling materials quickly, specialty blocks, crafting of weapons, cooking of food, brewing of potions, and anything else that could possibly be needed. The keeper is going to be on that. A technique used by the keeper is an ender pearl stasis chamber. By setting up multiple of these and labeling them with individuals' names, then having that individual throw an ender pearl into them, he now has the ability to call that individual back out of combat at a moment's notice. If a brute is about to be slain by the Slayer, he can simply ask to be called back, and for a small amount of his own life, he'll now avoid death and loot, and the Slayer will be denied the gaining of any materials that the individual was carrying. This can also be used to call back grinders more quickly. The reason the keeper will use barrels over the potential chest option is that chests can be seen while X-raying. A potential future X-ray glitch will allow a Slayer to see through solid rock and potentially steal from the hunter group. Barrels are your best defense against that, hidden under the ground where they cannot be seen and will have to remember their location. The keeper may also employ some kind of redstone, either for an early warning system or in a way of dealing damage. We have a large number of support items, and it is why the keeper's inventory space is so precious and relevant. Leads, emeralds, lapis, ender pearls, potions, specialty food items, honey, lava buckets, hard-to-destroy blocks such as crying obsidian, blocks that deal damage, blocks that have redstone capabilities, blocks that deny movement, specialty blocks to be produced and sent out, inventory extension, specialty tools, resource mobility, spawn anchors, supply caches hidden in the ground, scaffolding, the production of bone meal, and the production of potions are all within the keeper's wheelhouse. The keeper himself should look about like this. He should have his eyes on his compass at all times and be fully armored for his own protection. The keeper is essentially the ultimate support role in a Minecraft manhunt. With him you can apply constant effective damage to the Slayer without risking your own loss of materials, resources, or death. Now that you've seen the potential players, let's look at the potential strategy of this situation. A Minecraft manhunt will typically begin with all hunters surrounding the Slayer. The Slayer has been marked here by a green candle. In this scenario, we have two potential options here. Option 1 sees all chasers chasing down the Slayer. However, this does benefit the Slayer slightly, as he has chunk load priority on new resources and new loot contained within potential chests. If nothing changes, it's possible you could end up in the next situation, in which the Slayer now has the effective armor and tools to turn and face his opponents head-on, with little reprisal or little fear of dying. A potential alternative strategy, though, is to change things up. Rather than all hunters serve the role as a chaser, some of them could split off and become grinders. These individuals will go in a different direction and also have chunk load priority. They could potentially gain chest loot and new resources. This could lead to the ultimate beneficial position: a chaser out front, a keeper in the back, and two brutes methodically moving up behind him, with the Slayer unable to obtain better and better loot as he is unable to effectively grab out of chests. Of course, during the game, victory for the hunters could come at any moment, but the only reason we're moving forward is because we likely didn't succeed. That brings us to the same potential scenarios seen before. The Slayer has turned, has gotten a number of resources, and is taking on the hunters. This leads us to two potential scenarios. Scenario number 1 is that the Slayer is building a portal and going through. However, scenario number 2 is using your extra manpower and resources, you build a portal and go through before the Slayer. Let's follow the Slayer through his portal and see what awaits us going down this potential tree. If the Slayer builds a portal, it's likely all the hunters will use his portal to obtain the Nether. the Slayer will likely already be on his way off, looking for a fortress. It is here we have the potential to destroy this portal and move it to a better location. If we have the ability to do this, this gives the Keeper one of his first potential bases. A Keeper base could consist of a door that allows for an early warning, hard to dig through blocks that will prevent him from being ambushed, a large number of production facilities. Placing storage over lava could allow it to be destroyed by an axe and all the items will be burned rather than given to the Slayer. The portal back to the overworld will be heavily armored and reinforced to deny as much access to the Slayer as possible. If all things go as planned, he'll have to find a new way back to the overworld. Both of these options, however, lead to the next potential scenario. While all the hunters are desperately trying to chase him down and kill him. Although this can work, the only reason we would proceed is because it doesn't. So, let's go back in time and go through our own portal to see what happens. If we go through our own portal early, it can lead us to two potential possibilities. Possibility number one is that the Slayer's portal will connect to your own portal, and you have the ability to trap him. In this, we have a basic setup for making it as impossible as possible for the Slayer to leave and come out alive. This could slow down the Slayer by forcing him to build a new portal as far away as possible in the overworld. This is the next possible strategy. By taking over the fortress, slabbing it up, and preventing the spawning of blades, we deny the ability to even get blaze rods to the Slayer. We can also use those blaze rods to the hunter's benefit by brewing potions and, of course, making ender chests, which are an ultimate benefit to the Keeper. If all four of these strategies fail, however, you always have the next phase. Whether the Slayer decides to leave the Nether first, or the hunters decide to leave the Nether first, that's up to you to decide. If the Slayer exits the Nether first, it's back to the usual strategy, trying to chase him down as he uses Eyes of Ender to find the fortress. In the event that the Slayer is allowed to find the stronghold first, you'll be forced to set up a ragtag base outside of the portal and follow him in to try and kill the dragon. That will lead to the typical ending of every Manhunt video, which is an individual armored and ready for a fight trying to kill the dragon while 4 other individuals follow him. Although this can end in victory, it can also end in defeat. If the hunters try to find the stronghold first, the Slayer will have to chase them on his way to the stronghold as well. This will give the chaser the ultimate advantage at being able to set booby traps for the Slayer. In the event that our hunters find the stronghold first, we have another option. Here we have a well-constructed base that could only exist if we find the stronghold first. It consists of a tamper-proof spawn room, in which hunters can respawn and leave the room but then cannot get back inside. Potential item storage, the production of higher tier items, the production of a steady food supply, and access to the Nether, so that you can send zombie piglins and various Nether resources all the way to the end should the need arise. If the Slayer somehow gets through this base, or decides to go to another stronghold, we have the next option. If you've had the stronghold occupied for a moment, it's likely you sent in kamikaze chasers to construct various materials within the end. These materials could consist of an armored end portal well, which denies the Slayer the ability to get inside, as well as has an end crystal on it for healing the dragon. This end crystal would traditionally be completely covered by obsidian, but I've left it exposed here so that we can see it. Cheaply armored towers. These towers have the original spawning end crystals and are completely surrounded by end stone in order to protect them. Homemade end towers. These are even cheaper and are produced in awkward locations so that the Slayer cannot get to them. Floating end towers that are right above arrow fortifications. That way we can shoot at the Slayer while simultaneously healing the dragon. These fortresses will feature potential healing possibilities, crop production, and ender chests so that you have access to the overworld loot you once had. They will also feature a constant water stream so that in the event they are destroyed by the dragon, you can fall down safely and regain your composure to prevent yourself from losing any materials. The construction of a large near-island fortress can be done by lava water casting in the end. I don't see why this would need to be necessary, but it is an option. You could produce a very large secondary island that could be solely for your benefit. New chunk spawn priority, the fact that the individual does not have to fight the hunters, and the fact that their objective is nowhere where the hunters currently are, has always been the ultimate advantage of the Slayer. However, by allocating the hunters into roles and giving them a strategy for how to succeed, we have now tilted the balance of power. It is likely that using this meta, you'll see a lot more hunter victories and a lot less Slayer victories. Of course, all of this could be completely negated by various tactics and various ideas that could come up in the future. There's really no way of knowing. But that's the whole point of a game. To evolve your tactics and strategies and to outdo your opponent, only for them to improvise, plan, and try to outmaneuver you. That's the point of a game after all. But I've always been captivated by the idea of doing my own manhunt. If you'd like to see me do my own manhunt with my own friends, I would heavily suggest you leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and tell me that you would like to see me do any form of minigame, whether that's a manhunt, a bed war, or anything, and you might very well see me try to start doing them in the future. This is a video I've had a lot of interest in making over the past few weeks, and I was very glad that I could finally find the time to actually make it. I hope you liked this video, and I want to thank you for watching. But for now, this is your friend Timber saying bye-bye.